Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
Hi everyone, Jason Hunt here, inviting you to join us every Saturday morning for news, the week's headlines in science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, video games, plus Comic-Con updates and the weather, and the occasional interview along the way. We call it Good Morning Multiverse. We hope you join us every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, right here on Sci-Fi for Me TV.
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban-American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
Come get some. podcast. It's Critical Blast.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Critical Blast podcast, and I'm your guest host, Damascus Mincemeyer. Your regular host, RJ Carter, has been abducted by his evil twin, is being held hostage in an alternate dimension. But don't worry, he'll be back tomorrow night. And in the meantime, we have three of the creators of the new action horror anthology, Shoot the Devil, with us. And I would like to thank all three of you for coming. And let's just go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves.
My name's Mike Gallagher. I'm the low guy on the totem pole in this roster here. As anyone who regularly watches the podcast might know, I'm a first-time author. My debut novel, Body and Blood, was released earlier this year in August, which I spoke with Damascus about. And I've been a good friend of Declan Finn and Eric's for probably about a year or so over social media, and was approached to contribute thanks to I guess my writing was pretty good.
All right.
Well, commonly on the interwebs, I'm known as Ginger for somewhat obvious reasons, and I've been doing freelance editing and the occasional writing here and there for a very long time, thanks to the internet. And I've known Declan for a long time, thanks to starting to review some of his books via a website called Catholic Reads. And then I got to know Michael pretty well as a result of bringing Shoot the Devil to life. And this is actually the first anthology that I've had the pleasure of working on. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay. I am Declan Finn. I'm the published author of about 30 novels or so. I haven't counted in a while, and that was 2 or 3 publications back. I generally write in urban fantasy, horror, a lot of action. I don't do shoot 'em ups. I do blow 'em ups. When things are slow, sometimes I'll send a guy through the door with a gun. Sometimes it'll just be a hand grenade. And I will pretty much write in any genre that's not nailed down. Right now, my biggest series is St. Tommy NYPD, which is urban fantasy / horror. And I've also got a space opera series currently out called White Ops. And I was actually approached by Eric about this. How long ago was it?
This started a long time ago, actually. It came about as a result of just a random conversation on Twitter, actually, between me, Declan, and someone else. And the idea of punching demons just came up. I forget exactly why. And I just randomly threw out, it sounds like an anthology in the making. And I learned the very valuable lesson that you do not mention a writing project in Declan's presence unless you plan on actually doing something with it.
It's not a phrase you just casually throw around Declan Finn.
Yeah. You don't do that. You either shut your mouth or you plan on following through.
Well, all I did was shrug and go, yeah, sounds like a plan, so do it.
Yep.
And I believe it came up because that was, punching demons in the face was actually a line you used in a review of one of my books. I forget which one at this point.
I probably used that, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is definitely something I would write, and I have described your work in that fashion in the past.
There is a lot of action in this book. That's one thing I really liked about it. It had a very Pulp Fiction feel to it, like old school, like Weird Tales, Robert E. Howard Pulp Fiction feel to it. I love that. Like Solomon Kane, Conan. I love that.
I was so thrilled when I read your review, Damascus, that one of the first things you talked about was the sort of lineage connection to Robert E. Howard's Solomon
Mhm.
Kane pulp, because as much as I love Howard and as much as I know everybody loves Conan, Solomon Kane is
Mhm.
my guy.
Solomon Kane.
I'm the biggest Solomon Kane
Yes.
fan. So when I read that, I was like, fantastic. That hit that note.
I got it.
That's for me.
Mhm. Yeah, that was my first. As I was reading the book, that was like my initial thought was like, this is very Pulp Fiction, very very Solomon Kane.
Awesome.
So I really hooked on that very quickly.
So basically,
what was
after,
the?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was
going to
say,
say.
like, basically, after
Mhm.
Declan had put this idea and had kind of dumped this in Eric's lap, Eric then kind of did the hard work of rounding up a bunch of people, and good God, the roster this guy got was just kind of phenomenal. I mean, there
in all
are some
fairness, proper credit where it's due. Declan actually did by far the bulk of the author wrangling.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually
and
had
then-
more
and then,
authors, but one of them died. So, oops.
Oh,
That'll happen. And yeah, when we still came up a little short on word count, we threw it out there some more, and then Jaji Lamplighter, she helped wrangle up a few more, and then I primarily served as editor and general interface.
That's cool.
Just kind of getting it all, bringing it all together. And like I said, Declan really did the primary work of wrangling the authors. And but as Michael said, the roster was fantastic, from the established names that you've probably heard of, like Declan and John C. Wright and Lamplighter, of course, to the new blood like Steve Johnson and Michael here.
What were the aims with this anthology? Like, what was your when you created it? What was like your goal, like your mission statement? Just some of the most kick-ass grouping of stories you could, or was there a specific goal?
Like a big part of the whole, whatever you want to call it, Iron Age, Pulp Rev, Superversive, whatever term you want to latch onto it. The goal is to get us back in the mode of, you know what, the good guys are actually the good guys. We don't need to spend a bunch of time navel gazing and deconstructing everybody, being like, oh, well, did I really make the right decision here and there? And my golly, what could I have possibly done differently? And I'm really a bad person because I actually really believed in what I did. No, none of that nonsense here. No, when it comes down to it, we're going to punch the devil in the freaking face. And that's going to be the end of it. Why? Because he's got it coming. And we wanted to remind people of that.
Make no
in my review, I made a different. I wrote a line that said, "This is like the return of good triumphs over evil in horror fiction." As you said, there's a lot of navel gazing, a lot of sort of like I don't know how to describe it. They almost feel, some of the main characters feel guilty for like going out and trying to kill vampires or werewolves or what have you. And it's like,
I hate that when you see it. The Arrow series on CW was horrible for that. They'd constantly be criticizing Oliver Queen for making completely reasonable decisions. Like I remember there was one where there's like, you mean you're actually like keeping tabs on us and making sure you know where we are? And saying that's like a horrible thing when they go and do a bunch of things that prove exactly why that's a very good decision. And or like I remember one of the times when this was really first starting to hit me that this was a huge problem was in that Shannara series. I think it was Shannara on Netflix. Manu Bennett was one of the characters, and he was kind of like the mentor figure, and they were criticizing him for like being a hard mentor, basically, for being tough. And I'm like, but everything that this guy does is actually making perfect sense. And why are you criticizing him? He made it so that you are surviving and fulfilling your purpose in this messed up world. Why are you crying? And I noticed, like, I just recently finished the last St. Tommy book, Blue Saint, and there's a moment where Thomas Douglas he's kind of having those kind of thoughts, like, my God, what could I have done differently here? And he actually, not too many spoilers here, but he takes it to confession, and the priest basically pimp slaps him, and it's like, shut up. There's nothing you could possibly have done. Stop whining. I'm sorry. Seriously, think you're going to save this guy?
As you're saying that, Eric, I'm picturing the movie adaptation, and Declan is making his cameo as the priest on the other side of that confessional. Who's telling him that? It has to be cast that way if it ever happens.
I actually would love to see that.
I'd love to see the screen slide back and you can make out Declan's face and he just, reads Tommy the Riot Act there.
This is a fantastic idea. Actually, now I want to get out. Now I want to see if there's any possible way to make this happen.
Who do we know that writes screenplays? I actually know a guy who writes screenplays. Who won the John Milhauser Award? The guy who wrote the screenplay for Dirty Harry.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he could probably. Just throwing it out there, guys. We can talk about it.
Just need a production company.
Yes.
What?
The screenplay's the easy part.
Measly 20 million. As long as we steer clear of any crypto bros like Vox Day did, man. Holy Jesus, did you see that?
That was a train wreck.
Vox, I don't know if you know who Vox Day is, man. Damascus.
What?
Do you know who Vox
Your
Day
audio is breaking up.
Your audio
is breaking up. I can. No. Your audio is.
There's a fellow named Vox Day who runs his own publishing company called Castelia House.
Okay.
And he was going to take one of his. Okay. He was going to take one of his comic books and turn it into a movie. And somebody kind of walked away with all the money.
Oh, I see.
Really?
Gotcha. That's bad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's no good.
So,
was it one of the
Michael,
was it one of the Arctins books?
No, it was Rebel.
Yeah, he was trying. He was crowdfunding for a $1 billion. He was crowdfunding for a live action movie of a superhero comic named Rebel's Run. It's this red-haired superheroine who wears a Confederate flag bustier. And that's what he was trying to make a movie of. He got like a Kickstarter or whatever it was that raised $1 million for it. And he gave it, he put it in escrow with basically this like sham financial company. And they just sort of ran off with it. And so now the FBI they just arrested the guy and that's just starting through all that. But that money's all gone now.
Wow.
So, as long as we steer clear of any crypto bros when we start our production company there, we should be all right.
Definitely. So anyway, Michael and Declan, you two were writers in this. I'm curious to see where the inspiration for your individual stories came from. Let's start with Declan. Describe your story and what led you to write it.
Well, it was originally.
I love the twist at the end. I love the twist at the end. By the way, I'm not going to spoil it for everyone, but I love that.
Thank you. No, I'm glad it wasn't painfully obvious because there are sometimes it's like, so is this genius that nobody will get until the last line, or is this going to be so obvious everyone's going to get it immediately? So it's always a coin toss. No, somebody put online a question of, so has anyone ever been, how many superheroes or how many protagonists do you have out in the wild where their main motivation is redemption? And it's like, well, aside from at least 1, 2, 3 Joss Whedon series I can think of off the top of my head from 20 years ago. Not terribly many. So it's like, okay, I can work with this. So I wrote up this short story as a proof of concept. And, because everything in my life spirals into an undisclosed amount of novels, this has become kind of a basis for, more books down the line once I'm done with everything else I'm currently working on. And it was, so who am I going to get for redemption? Well, I can think of the most evil people I can think of off the top of my head. Like, let's go with this one. Mainly because, well, there are good reasons for it. And, I'm not going to make Adolf Hitler into a superhero seeking redemption. That's just, that's I'm not sure what's worse. The well of crazy or the well of evil. Yeah, no. It's like, so I went with, the better option. And it's like, okay, so we're going to have this person fighting demons as penance for every crime he's ever committed, and he's going to do it until the day he dies, or else. So I figured it was good motivation. And basically what you read is eventually going to turn into a chapter 1, only I'm going to save the punchline for preferably halfway through the book, but we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, I picked up on the redemption angle very well. I'm a big Joss Whedon fan, by the way. I love Buffy and Angel. Those are two of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Yeah, some of it doesn't hold up very well 20 years later from a writing standpoint. The practical effects, it's like, can more people do the practical effects angle, please? For the love of God, I'm tired of CGI.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. I love 80s practical effects and 80s horror movies. They're so good.
Man. Yeah. Like, even kind of the campier stuff is good. Like Fright Night was a relatively B flick, but that's got great makeup. Is my audio okay?
I love that movie. Yes, it is.
It is great.
What I've heard about practical effects versus CGI is that no matter how real a CGI effect is, it's still fake. No matter how fake a practical effect is, it's still real.
Exactly.
Which, if you stop and think about it, yeah, it's true.
The brain can still tell, I think,
To a
I
degree,
was watching a mini documentary. I was watching a mini documentary the other night on Pumpkinhead, which was made for like almost no money, and had some of the best creature effects there were.
Well, Stan Winston was involved, of course.
Yeah, that's true. When you got Stan Winston involved, you pretty much can't go wrong there, can you?
Exactly. But yeah, that was a fantastic movie. And so, Michael, tell us about your story and what led you to write it.
This is actually kind of funny because I started writing a completely different story. Really struggled through it, and I'm like emailing Eric. I'm like, hey, I'm working on a story. I swear to God, I'm working on a story. Because it's like 3 months down the line, and like everybody else has got their stories. And I'm like, I swear to God, I got a story for you, man. Don't worry. It was like a month and a half of waiting for an idea to hit me. And then I started writing this, and the story was good. I liked the story, but it was totally out of sync for what he wanted for this book. And there's actually like a little bit of navel gazing in it. That's how out of sync it was for this book. But what I had in kind of my back pocket was just, I had this spate shortly after I wrote my short story, The Nighthawk, for Kursova last year, where I was actually writing a lot of short stories. And one Halloween story that I wrote, just for no other reason other than it was Halloween and I wanted to kind of challenge myself, was the story Last Chance Lane. And God, I wrote it so far away now, I can't quite remember what it was that sort of made it click. Like, I can usually remember like these moments that sort of where I see something or I think of something and I say, oh my God, that would make a great story. But like, even sometimes it was probably something as benign as me seeing like some ominously wooded lot behind a convenience store, which if you've read the story, that's actually a big aspect of the setting in that story. And like, if some place just kind of strikes me just at the right moment, where I'm a big fan of Evil Benign, things that appear totally on the surface to be totally normal, but there's just this overwhelming dread around it for some reason, and you don't know why, and you just want to get out of there. I love that. I just read City of Shadows. Speaking of Declan Finn, the fourth book of the Tommy series, it is dripping with that, which is actually a really nice tonal change after the nuclear war that happened in book 3. But Declan, he can do it all, man. I'm telling you. But I kind of just had this idea, and I had been binging on true crime podcasts, and who had I listened to recently but was the Gosnell case, right? The story's so horrific it couldn't have been written in fiction. Nobody would have believed it. So I'm sure you can see where that factored into the story of a doctor in a residential office who's secretly performing abortions, and he's botching it and he's butchering people. That had kind of just was all in this sort of soup in my brain until I finally just started writing it, and it kind of eventually had congealed. And I remember sending the first draft of it off to Declan, and he excoriated the last third of it. He's like, why aren't who? And of course, his main criticism was, why isn't everybody more heavily armed? Why does everybody have a flamethrower? Why don't they have grenades? This is modern day, right? There's a police chaplain. He's like, you telling me he can't, just borrow a couple of stuff from the armory? Nobody will miss for a couple of hours. So I actually went back and rewrote the ending, and I said, okay, now this is perfect for Shoot the Devil. And I sent it off to Eric, and luckily he agreed. But yeah, that was kind of a funny story, because the story I originally wrote was nothing like this. It was a much slower burn, and I think it's a great story. Someday I'll try to get it out there somewhere, but it was totally not for this book. But when I kind of had it on the shelf and reworked a little bit, it was perfect for it.
I like the idea that you've got in this story of the ground, like the haunted ground, it's like infected by evil, and it especially at the beginning, how it moves around from place to place in town.
Well,
that's very interesting.
I'd heard this kind of a theory about some of these places, is that like part of the power of the allure is that a place that's haunted by an evil presence that's bound to it will do what it can to sort of, since it can't move, it'll try to draw people into it. And especially these days with people who do stupid stuff like urban exploring and kids going into an allegedly haunted house with a Ouija board or whatever, I thought, well, what if this thing finally was the house becomes like the neighborhood haunted house, and then the reputation behind it becomes so toxic that nobody wants to buy it, and then nobody wants to live on the block anymore, and it sort of just blights the entire block. And so once it kind of gets deserted, it becomes basically starved and desperate. And so, I thought, well, what if it just sort of tried to shift to another place where nobody would kind of notice it, And anyway, that's one of the great things about speculative fiction and horror and working with the supernaturals. You can take these bonkers ideas and just wild with them, and sometimes they turn into wonderful things.
Yeah, when you use the supernatural in your fiction, you can kind of fudge a lot too. You can be like, well, it wouldn't be this in real life. Well, how do you know? But
have you ever seen it?
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever seen? Like, how do you know that a ghost could, explode an atom bomb with it by snapping its fingers? Well, I don't know. No. Have you ever seen it happen? No.
Not exactly like there's a handbook for this.
Exactly.
Yeah, anybody who writes like boring supernatural or boring horror, just stop writing. There's no excuse for that,
I think that's the number one sin that I have when I read a lot of other people's stuff is if it's boring. Like if there's ghosts or vampires or werewolves or demons or what have you, and it's still dull, you're doing something wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely
I mean,
right.
action or not. I mean, you can make a good story without action. It can be dramatic and whatnot. But if you've got supernatural elements and like that, and it's still putting you to sleep, there's something seriously wrong. And I see it way too much. Like I see it in movies, I see it in books, I see it on TV, and I'm just like, oh my God. That's like the biggest sin right there is if it's boring. If you can't retain your audience's attention,
thank you,
then you've failed. That's like the only rule I have for writing right there.
You have failed. 100%.
As an editor who has worked with a lot of like first time authors, I've seen that a lot. It's bad. It's really
well, how many of them are they're first time authors and they're making mistakes, and how many of them are, oh yes, well this is how my creative writing professor taught me how to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's nice.
A lot of them, it's not, in all honesty, a lot of the ones that I've read, it's not lack of writing ability, it's ideological. It's worldview based. It has very little to do with their ability to write. Because I've seen a lot of well written crap.
Definitely.
I want to read this.
Oh, yeah,
I can see that it's well written. I get where you're coming from. I see everything that's going on. But why would anyone want to read this unless you're getting paid like that?
Yeah, well-written crap. I've read a lot of well-written crap over the years. That could be like its own subgenre right there. Well-written crap.
It's not.
Because as you say, there is a lot of like talented writers out there, but some of the content and the plots and the characters, especially, even more than the plots, but the characters are just boring as hell. It's just like, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And yeah, as Declan was saying, a lot of people, you can put a lot of that feet of professors or creative writing instructors or what have you. I am personally of the opinion that you really can't teach writing. You can learn it, but I don't know if you can actually teach it. If that makes any sense.
I would agree with that. I think one of the best things anybody can do is just jump into a group and start getting your stuff critiqued. And just like gird your loins. And this is the other thing, a lot of people can't handle being critiqued. I mean,
oh yes.
I don't even know how many people would wither under one email from Declan Finn. I mean,
in all honesty,
when you say iron sharpens iron, this guy has improved my writing so much. Because it's just it's honest and it hurts, but when it hurts, you know there's something to it. You know, that's the thing. That's the hard thing about criticism is stuff that really hurts is stuff you need to listen to.
I can understand a couple of people withering. Yeah.
But I've had stories where I've like not really agreed with what the editor has said till I rewrite part of them. But every time I do it, I always think the story is stronger for it, because I think the outside perspective on what the story is, sometimes I'm too close and I can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
But that outsider perspective is always helpful.
Well, with editing, I have found one of two things. One, you either need to get somebody else to look at it, or you need to put it away for several months and work on something else and come back, and then it's like,
definitely,
who wrote this crap? Oh wait, I did. Was I on drugs? What was wrong with my life that I wrote this? Because this one line should be about a page, and this 5 pages, we're going to spike this now. But no, my editing style is basically, one, here, this is what's wrong. Let me explain what's wrong, why it's wrong, and here's how you fix it, because I only do to other people what I will do to my own writing. Because, granted, I cannot take somebody else's head and smash them into the desk like I do myself. But, it's like, okay, let me give you a good idea of what my thought process is and move on from there. I'm told that's helpful by the 2 or 3 people who have actually, put up with me.
And at the same time, you can only lead a horse to water. Sometimes you can make them drink, no matter what.
What's the old Dorothy Parker line? Use horticulture in a sentence. You can lead a horticulture, but you can't make her think.
I love that. So we've talked about what trends we don't like in horror fiction at the moment. Are there any trends that we're seeing that we do like out there at the moment, or is it just that, or do we just need to see just because it's at a low point? I mean, but there's still good stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
I generally do not read horror because there is so much of the genre that is just nihilistic, navel-gazing, Michigas. Don't even get me started on Stephen King. There are people who still have a fatwa on him for the Dark Tower series. And I'm very glad I waited for the reviews on the last book before even getting into book one. And, but hell, the best horror I've read lately has been Mike Gallagher. Yes, this one. Russell Newquist, and he's more action horror like I am. Technically, N.R. LaPointe does some great work. I think he wants to be H.P. Lovecraft, only there's way more explosions. Like
the story he wrote in there was amazing in this book. I really like that.
Read his books. He's great. And you've already read Mike's book, so excellent. So you've already got the starter kit. But yeah, in terms of horror, I'm trying to think of any other names that come to mind. YouTube? What about you?
I mean, actually, I got to talk with you a little bit about this. I mean, I think that modern horror is pretty much a wasteland. Eric, what are your feelings about it these days?
As far as horror?
Yeah, does anybody really stand out to you?
Honestly, I don't.
Who's not like Superversive, I guess,
I pretty much, first of all, as far as fiction goes, I almost entirely these days just read like the Superversive crowd. One, there's so much of it to be perfectly. I mean, there's a ton of it, and when it comes to
just John C. Wright.
It's kind of John C. Wright is. He is and he remains my favorite living author because some of the stuff that he's written is just utterly mind-blowingly amazing. The imagination of that dude and his ability to go into detail and keep the story moving is truly something to behold.
His story was my favorite.
For everyone who's ever read Stone Wither, you know what I'm talking about. What was that, Damascus?
His story in Shoot the Devil was my absolute favorite in the entire book.
Yes.
Fell Beast. That was when I was reading it. I was all like, I was thinking like you were saying, I was like, where does this guy come up with this? It's a vampire story, but it's not like anyone that I've ever read before. It really breaks it down into what it would be like if it was real. And I was like, that's pretty good.
And I actually have your review is up here. I just want to read really quick. You say, but of all the tales, none is more worthy of unabashed praise than John C. Wright's chill-inducing masterpiece, Fell Beasts.
I stand by that, yeah.
Not only the valedictorian of Shoot the Devil, but one of the most original pieces of vampire fiction in recent memory. And I would agree with that. Everyone who I've read in the Amazon reviews, everybody who talks about this thing, they talk about two stories. They talk about his Fell Beast, and they talk about Nate LaPointe's. And this almost feels in a way like there's a sort of generational baton passing here because Nate and I, when we were kind of messaging when this whole thing started out, we kind of consider ourselves like the bench five, even though I think Nate's starting five, we were like, John C. Wright's in this. Can you believe they want us in it too? Do you think they made a mistake or something? We were like,
no,
John, you don't say no when you're invited into an anthology that John C. Wright is in. This anthology, well-known, unheard of. Corey Comstock, I think, had his first ever
Yes,
Published
first
work
story in
is
there. Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Phenomenal story. I loved his story.
That was really well written. I really like that. When I read in the biographies
Mhm.
that was the first thing that never been published, I was
I
like,
know.
that's really good.
The assemblage of talent in this anthology is one of the most impressive I've ever read, and I still can't believe I'm a part of it. to be frank, to be perfectly frank, yeah.
But
If I could just follow up on something that Declan said about about King's Dark Tower series, I wasn't I read like the first 3 books of that very quickly. Like they had already been all been published for a little while already. So I read them back to back very quickly. I was loving it. Then the years go by, like many years, and Wizards and Glass finally comes out. I'm like, yes, awesome. And I read it. I'm like, okay. And then a couple years another year or two, no, a couple years after that yet, Walls of the Kala finally comes out, volume 5. And I read it, and I'm like, something smells fishy. I don't think I like where this is going. And I never read 6 and 7. Because it's like I could just tell something's wrong here. And based on what I heard about the way book 7 ends, vindicated.
Yeah, King's really got me
vindicated. My spider senses did not lead me astray.
Yes, maybe he should go back onto the cocaine. I don't know.
Maybe it would probably help. I mean,
get himself into another accident and undo whatever happened when
the truck nearly took him out the first time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Stephen King, he was never really one of my favorites. Like I was like the Joss Whedon, Clive Barker. Those were like my go-to guys. Like Stephen King, he was okay.
God, Clive Barker could clearly really write, but holy Jesus, he was tough to get through. Like eventually, I just had to stop trying. I'm like, look, man, I know you can write, but it's just not for me, you know. It was,
some of them are pretty dense. The Great and Secret Show, I mean, that's a great book, but the plot of that is like labyrinthine. You know, I mean, I liked it, but it was.
Yeah, actually, the closest I can come to somebody who is relatively in the horror genre that I do read more often than not is Dean Koontz. And I'm not even sure he's strictly in horror at the moment.
It depends, you know?
Yeah, although I will admit, within the last 6 to 8 months, and Eric and Michael will get this joke, that I read a book of his called Darkfall, where it had a urban, I think it was New York City police detective going up against a evil serial killing Bokor.
Oh, cool.
Uh-oh.
And it's like,
sounds familiar.
I'm really glad I wrote my books first. Then I read it. But it's like, wait, what year did this come out? It's like, oh,
yeah, right.
Hey, I actually have friends who read both Dean Koontz and my books and did not jump on me for this. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm either A, different enough, or B, nobody else has read this one.
Or you were first.
Here's hoping.
I have noticed, like, reading Dean Koontz, because he is one that I go to. He is a mainstream author that I go to every now and again. A lot of his, I do see other contemporary pop culture things reflected in his work a lot.
Yeah.
Like if I go through, like reading through his Odd Thomas series, there was who was another Thomas who's a saint, but that's beside the point. Reading through it, I did detect elements of other things that were popular at the time that those books were getting written. You know, like there was one of them where it's just like it was faint, but there were like echoes of the TV series Jericho in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm like,
I remember that show.
I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I'm like, I bet you he's watched it. And then, of course, there's obvious elements of like Sixth Sense that are in there, but I see dead people. That you're going to have that. But yeah, I do notice he does. I think he does draw from other sources fairly frequently. So honestly, Declan, I wouldn't be terribly shocked if he read your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think anything can
I
be
would
worse.
not be shocked.
If you read my stuff, it's like, hi, can I have a blurb?
Yeah, right.
Right.
We were talking about the Dark Tower earlier. I don't think anything would be worse than the Dark Tower film adaptation, though. I mean, that was pretty bad. Get 7 books in 90 minutes.
I did not see it.
Funny, I thought it was supposed to be the first.
I didn't even bother watching the movie because I'm just like, it's not gonna be good.
It's a Stephen King adaptation. How do you not do a multi-film? Whatever it is, they broke. Oh God, what was that? The End of the World, Plague. There, I can't think of the name.
The Stand.
The Stand.
The Stand. I mean, they broke The Stand into a 3-part miniseries for TV, and each one was 3 hours long. And,
now they're making an entire series.
Pages, but my God.
Mm-hmm.
How do you not break a 7-book, $7 you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you not do a multi-film deal with Idris
The Stand?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, and they did the Dark Tower.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying how they just they truncated it all into one movie?
Yeah, just think of
I mean,
because you're right. They do the Marvel movies. They get the DC extended universe. They had an opportunity there. They could have made even hit the Harry Potter series. They could have easily done something with Dark Tower. Stephen King's name alone would have put asses in the seat for the movie theater.
That's it, exactly right. I don't know what they were.
And they had a golden opportunity to do that, and they didn't do it.
Yeah,
I don't envy that writer's room, man. Okay, here's the source material. We got to turn this down to 90 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
They turned The Hobbit into 3 movies.
Yeah. Exactly. Turn Hobbit into 3 movies. Yeah. That's like the reverse right there. That's how do you got they're adding stuff. That's even worse.
You could almost finish the entire book in the amount of time it took for them to do one film.
Mm-hmm. I remember when The Walking Dead came out, and I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead comic. I was a big fan of the comic at the time. And yet all the characters that were getting popular off the show, like Daryl, wasn't even in, and it was people, he wasn't even in the comic, people. It's they're adding stuff now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hey, when one of your main actors is, who was there from start to finish, decides, yeah, I'm going to leave in the middle, it's like, okay, now what? And somebody's going to have to come up with the concept of, guys, recasting. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Because, hell, if somebody had the balls to do that, they could have just, Star Wars could have made the original Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire trilogy, and they just recast everybody. I've seen Sebastian Stan.
I remember those
on haircut. He'd make a good Mark Hamill.
That's right.
So we've talked about Pulp Fiction and Solomon Kane and whatnot. What other movies and books and TV shows really influenced your writing?
Why on earth is it that movie studios are so afraid to recast roles?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question.
It didn't seem to hurt the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies any. I actually like some of the casting decisions.
Casting-wise, I thought he was pretty spot the hell on there. I thought that was pretty good. It was just terrible screenplays.
Well, yeah, it was Carl Urban and Zach Quinto was okay, this is a little terrifying. It's
Carl Urban's pretty dependable, though.
Oh yeah, this is true.
I mean, he's great.
Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, Damascus. What was your original question?
I was going to say, we've talked about Pulp Fiction and Solomon Kane and stuff, and I was going to say, what, especially you two as writers, what movies and books and TV shows really influenced you to become writers and to want to do action horror in particular?
Well, I fell into the genre. I originally started with vampire fiction because I was sick and tired of people screwing it up.
Oh God, yes.
It's
Yes.
like, hi, I'm sorry, holy water works, crosses work. If they don't work, what are you fighting exactly? Because if it's a supernatural monster, supernatural weapons are going to work. Otherwise, we've got a problem here just with world building. So I did a vampire series. St. Tommy NYPD was originally supposed to be plain old urban fantasy. Unfortunately, in my youth, I had researched serial killers. By youth, I mean high school.
Right.
I thought serial
Same
killers
here.
would make some. Yeah, I thought they'd make some easy villains, and I found that they were really boring. But I took serial killers. I was researching demonology for the book, and I smashed it together. And by the time I was done with like chapter 3, it's like, and I wrote to my publisher at the time. It's like, hi, I know you wanted urban fantasy. You might wind up with horror. Okay, that's fine. And I
It's
just
fantastical enough.
yeah, and I wrote and I rolled with it anyway. But no, my original gateway drug into writing was fan fiction, and it went from okay, this is going to be kind of fan fictiony. I didn't even know the term at the time. It was like '98. I don't bother with people online because I barely had AOL at the time, and it's like okay. By the time I was done, it was 8,000 pages later, and it doesn't look anything like the original product. So it's like, okay, I'm going back and I'm going to rewrite from the start. But that's how I fell in. So if you want to say something inspired writing in general, it was Babylon 5. If you want to say what inspires my horror aspect to what it does, A, research. B, best horror movie I have ever seen is Jaws. But I know it's basically a remake of Moby Dick, only with a shark instead of a
We're gonna
whale.
need a bigger boat.
Yeah. But it was the creepiest damn thing ever, and frankly, that is all because their animatronic shark didn't work. So, hey, sometimes you get lucky. Or as Terry Brooks puts it, sometimes the magic works.
Yeah. Actually, I think working within limitations makes you more creative most of the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got in, as you know, with my book Body and Blood, which was, I think sincerely something given to me by God to write to help me, and the story that came out of that turned out to be essentially science fiction or urban fantasy horror. I get this; you could look at it either way, really. And it seemed to be that I was pretty good at that. I read tons of science fiction growing up. Loved Mike Resnick, Ray Bradbury, H.P. Lovecraft, all that stuff. My dad was of the generation where he might have at one time had Playboy stashed in the house, and the Playboys were all gone, but the science fiction anthologies that Playboy used to publish also. He had all these paperback anthologies of like Playboy's best science fiction of the year, and I'd look at them not realizing Playboy published science fiction. I'd be like, what the hell? But I'd read them, and it was all Ray Bradbury and all these great authors, and and of course, growing up, the same dad who would take me to mass every week through waist high snow. I mean, there was no getting out of mass, and I grew up steeped in that tradition and that beauty and that mysticism. So, and at the same time, in the middle of the Satanic Panic, so culturally there have always been these kind of warring forces, and I think I always had this keenness for the idea that evil can be fought and can be defeated. It's something that a lot of people don't grasp onto, and of course, popular media doesn't show. And so I want to put that out into the world to help to show that.
It's pretty cool. I think we all can agree that Declan was talking about vampires, and I think one of the things that ruined vampire fiction was the paranormal romance genre. That went a long way. When vampires just became like glorified serial killers with fangs instead of like, they became like romantic interests.
Yes.
Instead of actual monsters, it's like,
yeah.
Come on, man.
And I think the 1992 Dracula.
The Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Adaptation did a great job of showing the vampire both as a seducer and as a horrifically ugly monster. God, that movie is like, except for Keanu Reeves, that movie is like just about perfect. Certainly tonally.
Gary Oldman was a really good Dracula too.
Really great Dracula. There was Lucy when she's turned into the bride in white, when she's like lurking around this graveyard, and she's like kidnapping kids at night to drink their blood. So Van Helsing and crazy ass Dennis Hopper, everybody go to kill her, and they're brandishing crucifixes, and she's hissing and spitting blood, but she's got this gorgeous white gown on, and her face is totally pallid white. She looks beautiful, except she's this monstrous, hideous thing, and they they kill her, and then if I'm not mistaken, there's a scene where like he comes down, he's about to cut her head off with a sword, and just as the blade hits, it cuts to a tavern where he's like hacking into a steak. And he's really casually saying, like, yeah, we stuffed her mouth with garlic and a bunch of communion wafers, and then we cut her head off, And like, yes, that's how you go out and you fight vampires. They're beautiful and they're seductive, but it's all a horrible illusion. And if you don't show both sides, it's just a glorified romance novel. Sorry, didn't
True.
Yeah. No,
Dracula is one of those books that you were talking about, the baton being passed from one generation to the next. Dracula seems to be one of those books that it's been around since 1897, and every generation seems to reinterpret it in its own way. That's one of those kind of. I think perhaps that may be why it's such a classic, because I think classics have that ability to be reinterpreted every so often, and yet still the core is the same.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to.
Oh no.
Sorry, guys. I don't mean to monopolize this. I just thought he made a really good point there.
No,
because
you're fine.
What's interesting about that is as vampires became less supernatural and society, I think, became more agnostic, that did reflect in there. I thought that was a really good observation.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, hell. Yeah. When I was researching vampires for one of my own vampire novels, it was, belief in vampires spiked after, once you had the Enlightenment and religion started declining. It's like, religion goes downhill a little bit, and suddenly everyone has a sudden urge to reach for their crucifixes because the dead are coming out of the grave. It's like, I wonder if there's a correlation here, but that's none of my business. Little Kermit drinking tea meme, but to get back what you said about Dracula, the definition of a classic that I grew up with is something that survives the generation that it was published in, and it keeps surviving because it does keep saying something to each new generation. And hell, Bram Stoker will survive, but few people have heard of Varney the Vampire, which was...
I've heard that.
Yeah, which was earlier 1800s.
That was one of the Penny Dreadfuls. That was one of the Penny Dreadfuls, yeah.
Bingo. So, he didn't Bram Stoker did not invent the vampire genre, but he did wind up making it more it is what has lasted longer. And for all the critiques of how overwritten it is, it still has themes like using modernity and modern techniques and technology versus old world monsters. We're going to have the steam engine versus the boat ride. We're going to have, the Texan come in and cut his head off with a Bowie knife, which I think I've only ever seen the Texan with his Bowie knife and the universal coalition to take out Dracula maybe twice. Once was the Bram Stoker Dracula movie with, unfortunately, Keanu Reeves, and the other one might have been when they brought it out on Broadway 20 years ago. Don't ask me for specifics. I barely remember that it was a thing, and while it had some decent special effects, it's like, yeah, nobody's making this into a filmed musical anytime soon, thank God.
Remember the series they had a couple years ago? What was it? Netflix, Amazon, something like that. They had the 3-part series. And then it was of Dracula, and then it was
I think it was
going
BBC.
well with the first 2 episodes, and the third one. Yeah, BBC. There you go. Yeah. And then
it's
the third episode,
BBC. They can screw up anybody. Good Lord. Have you seen an Agatha Christie adaptation on BBC in the last 10 years? Don't. Just don't.
The 13th Doctor has pronouns.
Wait, which one is this?
I'm not going to into that.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, the bait and switch was like, we're going to bring back David Tennant because we're bringing back Russell T Davies. It's Old Home Week. Anyway. That's a different conversation.
What does everyone here think? Hope that readers take away from this book, like Shoot the Devil?
That they have a good time. Sorry, I'm not pretentious. I just want people to have fun.
You have a very good point there. I think one thing that's missing from horror a lot now is the element of fun. Because I love 80s horror. I love 80s movies, 80s horror. And that big element you had then was, I think it was fun. I mean, even if it was cheesy, even if it was, over the top or whatever, a lot of it was still fun. I mean, it was just like sit back, with your friends and have some popcorn and watch something. Even if it's goofy, it's still fun.
Yeah.
And I think that element's been lacking a lot. Especially, I think there seems to be a correlation with the rise of computer-generated special effects and that, because it's almost like they try to be too realistic. So,
have you?
I definitely think that element of fun is missing.
I guess there's a new Jeepers Creepers movie coming out, and some stills of it have been making their way around Twitter, and this thing looks worse than shot on VHS, man. The green screen is so bad. The lighting is so bad. One person I saw said, Jesus Christ, I've seen better FMV games from the 90s. And he's right. It's so horrible and artificial, and it just looks like oh my God. Like, you might as well have not even tried. I almost feel like this is one of those things where they had to make it to retain the license. Like, do you remember like that last Hellraiser movie?
Oh, yeah.
They didn't want to release it. They had to make it.
Yeah.
And then somehow
to retain the copyright, right? Exactly.
That's how cheap this feels. This new Jeepers Creepers movie, but like that. That's.
Well, every time somebody relies too much on CGI, you can tell it's so much corporate interference. Because I'm sorry, corporate hears, oh, CGI is cheaper than practical effects, and they say, oh, is that right? Here, have half the budget they need for a standard movie, period. To heck with practical effects or CGI. So we're just going to give you this. Make the most of it. And you end up with something that looks like, Sci-Fi Channel would be embarrassed to put out. And they put out some really embarrassing crap.
That's what happens when you try to distill art down to numbers on a spreadsheet. That's what you're going to get.
There are two things.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah.
Wait.
There are two.
Yeah.
Your audio is
Yeah.
Gone.
If there are two things that
Okay.
There are 4 lights. What? Hello?
No, you could have been talking this whole time and we'd have never known.
there are really two things I think that illustrate that the major studios are messing up with CGI extremely, like just incredible. Oh, is it? Ah, well, dang it. Never mind.
No, we can hear you now.
We can hear you now, okay.
The Hellmouth has shifted to his place.
No, it's but my internet is apparently completely fried for the day.
Oh no.
At least you're off the hook, Damascus.
Mhm.
Yeah, but basically, Declan's right. I think a lot of us wrote stories just to be fun. LJ Lamplighter has a hilarious story in there about I'm going to mangle the lore here because I'm not as familiar with her Prospero's children books as a lot of other people might be. But it's basically a secret group infiltrates a meeting of the Illuminati, and it's like Joseph Stalin and Vlad the Impaler, and they've all been kept alive for all these hundreds of years. And they all get together, but it's like freaking hilarious. Vlad the Impaler keeps falling asleep because it's the middle of the day, and people have to keep, there's people who've been grandfathered in that Joseph Stalin doesn't like, and he wishes they were kind of out of the table and stuff like that. Hilarious. I mean, you're gonna find everything in this book, from really. I mean, John C. Wright's story, the valedictorian thing. I think everybody would agree with that. It takes place in one room, 2 characters, 1 room.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a master class of tension. Declan and me, we're all about the fun action stuff, and although he's got a great, as we mentioned, his has got a great twist. I can't write twists like that. If you're more into the fantasy stuff, Russell Newquist has his is a.
That one was hilarious. Game Warden. That one was a hilarious story.
Great one. N.R. LaPointe, I am telling you right now, that guy's going to be one of the best writers. If he blows up, he is somebody to watch because everything he writes is a banger. And he's written one of the best YA novels I think I've read in 20 years, Chalk. He's fantastic. That Phantom Ridge story is phenomenal. Weird West. He could make a series out of that. No problem.
Definitely. Oh, definitely. Actually, I almost put that line in my review, almost saying that you could make a series out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, they really should.
I got that. I definitely got that, especially with the husband and wife team, and the wife has the psionic ability. I was all like, there's a lot of potential with this.
And man, if the right literary agent reads his stuff, they're going to see just how marketable he is, because his YA stuff is full of cute characters that you could immediately see as a plushie. Stuff like that. I'm telling you, man, you could see people cosplaying as his characters. He's got stuff that would explode if the right person gave him the right exposure. So just hoping, man. I hope you get it, man. But, and if I get my second book done to the next 5 years, you guys will enjoy that.
Definitely. Yeah. So I wonder if there's going to be a sequel to Shoot the Devil. I don't know if Eric, you pop back up. Do you know if there's going to be a sequel to Shoot the Devil?
Can you say that again?
Sequel.
Is there going to be a sequel? There's going to be a sequel. Shoot the Devil sequel.
Well, you know what? One of the reasons that I was doing this was to just kind of see what the response would be. And I've got a lot of really good positive feedback on this. And I'm going to go ahead and tentatively say, there's going to be more to follow after this.
Good. Shoot the Devil again. He didn't die enough the first time.
Shoot the Devil again. Shoot the Devil.
We were actually chatting about subtitles for the second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like Dracula. He never quite goes away.
So I think that this. I think that this is going to continue in some way, shape, or form.
Shoot the Devil, of course.
That's a crossover.
Yeah, crossover. You have a crossover. There we go.
I apologize for my internet. There you go.
I've been there many times. It took me, I think, a year and a half of doing these shows before my video would actually work. Before that, it was touch and go. And I was on a show with the last time I was on a show with Michael. I just dropped me right out, and I was just like, That was just a
It's a great
mid-sentence.
inauguration to the Critical Blast podcast.
Yeah. Oh. But tonight has been
It's going really good. The host left. Wow. I must be a great interview subject.
Oh man. No, tonight has been a blast with the three of you, though. I must say that. It's been a really good conversation. And I have to thank all three of you for being here. And I want to tell everybody to actually, you know what? First off, any shout outs? Anybody want to give any shout outs to anybody out there?
I guess not.
Gosh, I've got to. Other than these two guys, I've got to obviously Declan. Declan for giving me the kick in the ass to get to actually go take this from random comment to reality, and Michael for really stepping up and providing a lot of help when it was needed. He basically did all of the graphics and everything for the marketing for this. Handled the formatting, just was fantastic. And also Daniel Humphreys, who was one of the contributors, he helped me kind of wrap my head around PubShare and everything which we used to distribute Shoot the Devil, and of course Jaji for helping with the author wrangling, and then just in general all of the contributors on this who were just fantastic to work with all around.
Absolutely.
All right. And Daniel Humphrey's story was really good. I have to say that was one of my favorites.
I will recommend his entire Paxton Locke's novel series. He could he is. I'm not going to say he's the next Jim Butcher, but if Jim Butcher dropped dead tomorrow, God forbid, he could Brandon Sanderson the rest of the Harry Dresden series without missing a beat.
I think I'd reiterate. I'd have to thank Declan, dude. Over like the year and a half I've known you, man, you've given me so many opportunities and just done so much to help me with my writing and everything, man. I literally would not be on the stream right now. I'm like just slightly fanboying here, sitting here. I never thought I'd be on a stream with you and Eric. I'm looking over here like I'm going to see Eric. And just thank you so much for all the critique. I mean, like, drop of a hat, this guy will critique my stuff, not like he's busy or anything, And Eric, man, for inviting me on, I was more than happy to offer my talents to this. It made me so happy to do all this. I think it's great that you actually, because a lot of people just toss ideas around about wouldn't this make a great book, but man, you took up the ball and you ran with it, and you got us all marshaled, and you gave a lot of guys their shot, and that was just great in and of itself. And man, I got to thank everybody on the roster. This was a tremendous assemblage of talent, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Awesome. I'd like to thank all three of you for being here on the show tonight. It was really, really fun, and I'd like to tell everybody out there to go to Amazon and check out Shoot the Devil, because it's a really good read, and I really enjoyed it. And I would like to have all of you. I would like to have all of you back on at some point.
Sure.
Either together when you do the next volume, or independently, whatever. Absolutely. And you were going to say something, Michael. I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I just wanted to let anybody know, if you did want to, the book actually has a website. If you want to go check that out, you can see a trailer, download a media kit if you want. Read some author bios, or just reach out to us. There's a contact form. You can go to shootthedevil.wordpress.com too, and there's a link to the Amazon page.
All right, everyone. This has been great fun. I've enjoyed all of you, and everyone out there, remember, if you like this show, I'll like, share, subscribe, and that's all I got to say. Good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you.